Section: Introduction. In this section, we discuss the current landscape of AI systems, which are predominantly general models that perform well across various domains. The top models in areas like math and coding also have a wide-ranging knowledge base, covering topics from history to cooking to medical diagnostics. When we create specialized models today, they are often fine-tuned versions of these general models rather than entirely new ones, although there are exceptions. This approach is beneficial because it allows us to use a single model for multiple tasks. However, the generality of these models can lead to inefficiencies and safety concerns. For example, coding assistants may have unnecessary knowledge that isn't relevant to their tasks. We propose that smaller, specialized models could retain essential coding skills without the extra irrelevant information, potentially reducing safety risks. We explore fundamental questions about how neural networks learn and represent skills, which is crucial for developing narrow AI systems. Our investigation focuses on two main themes. First, we examine when it is feasible to train effective neural networks from scratch using a narrow dataset. Through experiments with a new synthetic task that has a hierarchical structure, we discover that training on a broader dataset may be necessary to efficiently learn specific narrow tasks. This finding adds to the understanding of how task structure affects neural network learning, particularly in the context of narrow AI. Second, we look into whether we can prune larger networks to create smaller, specialized ones. We find that the way networks represent information complicates this process. While the concept of distributed representations has been widely studied, we analyze how this affects pruning and unlearning in the context of narrow AI. Our contributions include defining a synthetic task called compositional multitask sparse parity, CMSP, which extends previous work. We observe that networks trained on this task show significant curriculum learning effects, indicating the need to train on a broad range of tasks to learn specific ones effectively. We also investigate pruning and unlearning in networks trained on CMSP, noting that tasks are often intertwined, making pruning a less effective strategy for narrowing skills. However, we find that a simple regularization method can help us sparsify networks and unlearn certain skills. We conduct empirical comparisons of methods for creating narrow systems using datasets like MNIST and language models. Our preliminary results suggest that pruning methods may be more effective than distillation or training from scratch for developing smaller, specialized systems. The organization of our work is as follows. We briefly outline our methods, conduct a detailed case study on the CMSP task, define the task, analyze network training dynamics, identify distributed representations, and apply a regularization method for pruning. We then compare various methods for creating narrow models and discuss related work before concluding our findings. Section Summary. In this section, we discuss the current landscape of AI systems, highlighting the advantages and drawbacks of general models versus narrow, specialized networks. We explore how training on broad data distributions can enhance the learning of narrow tasks and examine the challenges of pruning broad networks to create smaller, more efficient models, ultimately finding that certain pruning methods may outperform traditional approaches like distillation. Section: Case Study. Compositional multitask sparse parity. In this section, we conduct a thorough examination of curriculum learning and pruning using a straightforward synthetic task, which we refer to as compositional multitask sparse parity, CMSP. To define CMSP, we note that it builds on the sparse parity task and the multitask sparse parity task. The sparse parity task is a binary classification problem involving binary strings of a certain length, where the label is determined by the parity of bits at specific indices. We observe that when training neural networks on this task, the loss curve shows a significant drop after an initial plateau, a phenomenon also seen in large language models and other simple tasks. We then extend this to the multitask sparse parity, MSP, problem, where input strings consist of two parts, control bits and task bits. The control bits indicate which subtask to solve, and for each sample, only one control bit is active. The label for that sample is the parity of the bits corresponding to the active control bit. We find that when the frequency of subtasks follows a power law distribution, the learning dynamics reflect this distribution, with subtasks being learned at different times based on their frequency. However, a limitation of the MSP task is that the subtasks are independent. In reality, learning often follows a hierarchical structure, where simpler tasks are learned before more complex ones. To reflect this, we introduce CMSP, which requires that subtask indices do not overlap and allows multiple control bits to be active simultaneously. In this case, the label is the parity of the bits corresponding to all active control bits. We categorize samples with one active control bit as atomic, and those with multiple as composite. When we analyze the learning dynamics on CMSP, we find strong effects of curriculum learning. We denote different sample types by their active control bits. For instance, we train neural networks on CMSP samples with a specific number of control bits and task bits. Our findings reveal that networks learn atomic tasks before composite ones. Interestingly, when we remove atomic samples from the training set, learning composite tasks takes significantly longer. In our experiments, we observe that training on a diverse set of samples is more efficient for learning composite tasks than training on composite samples alone. This suggests that networks first compute the parity of atomic subtasks and then use these results to learn composite subtasks, making the learning process easier. We also find that deeper networks perform better in learning these tasks, as they can learn composite tasks more reliably and quickly than shallower networks. This advantage of depth may explain why larger models excel at various tasks. However, we acknowledge that our toy task is somewhat artificial, and it remains uncertain how these findings translate to real-world tasks. In many cases, specialized models can be trained effectively on narrower datasets. Our work indicates that for certain tasks, a broader data distribution may be necessary for efficient learning of subtasks. We will now explore how to effectively transfer knowledge from larger models to smaller, specialized ones. Section Summary. In this section, we explore the compositional multitask sparse parity (CMSP) task, which extends the multitask sparse parity problem by allowing multiple control bits to be on simultaneously and requiring disjoint subtask indices. Our findings reveal that training on a diverse dataset containing both atomic and composite samples significantly enhances learning efficiency, highlighting the importance of hierarchical structure and depth in neural networks for effectively solving complex tasks. Section: Non-local representations in CMSP networks. In this section, we explore non-local representations in CMSP networks. If the circuitry for specific subtasks were confined to certain neurons, it would be easy to specialize broad networks by simply removing the neurons linked to some subtasks while keeping others. However, the reality is often more complex, which we will discuss further. Recent studies in neural network interpretability have shown that individual neurons can activate for a wide range of unrelated inputs, indicating that the actual features of the model do not necessarily correspond to the neurons themselves. Several explanations for this polysemanticity exist. One reason is that the model architecture may not favor a specific basis, while another is the superposition hypothesis, which suggests that the need to represent more features than available dimensions prevents features from being represented as distinct directions in the feature space. In our CMSP networks, we notice a similar issue. Without explicit regularization, there is no motivation for the network to neatly localize certain circuits to specific neurons. We train networks with two hidden layers on a dataset of CMSP samples, focusing on different skill trees until convergence. Our visualizations reveal that the network is densely connected without clear structure. We attempt to prune the network to maintain performance on subtask 0, 1, 2, while unlearning 3, 4, 5. Our groups of parameters include the in-weights, bias, and out-weights for each hidden layer neuron. We compute ablation scores on the distribution for subtasks 0, 1, 2, and prune greedily. However, when we prune without regularization, performance tends to drop quickly, as the network isn't optimized for easy pruning. After pruning, we conduct an additional 1,000 training steps on the relevant data to recover performance at higher sparsity levels. We find that tasks 0, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5 are often entangled, meaning aggressive pruning on one can still affect the other. The degree of this entanglement varies based on the initial conditions. To address this, we apply a regularization penalty that encourages the network to unlearn certain tasks while making its features less distributed, facilitating more aggressive pruning. We implement this by training with a group lasso sparsity penalty on the network weights. After applying this regularization, we recompute neuron ablation scores and prune again. Our findings indicate that this method effectively helps us unlearn skills and makes the network more amenable to pruning, allowing us to prune more aggressively while maintaining performance on subtask 0, 1, 2. However, we do not recover performance on subtasks 3, 4, 5 at any level of sparsity. Section Summary. In this section, we explore the challenges of localizing circuitry in CMSP networks, noting that neurons often exhibit polysemanticity, complicating the pruning process. We demonstrate that by applying a regularization penalty during training, we can effectively unlearn certain tasks while enhancing the network's ability to be pruned, allowing for more aggressive reductions in network size without sacrificing performance on the targeted subtasks. Section: Pruning versus Distillation, MNIST. In this section, we explore the challenge of developing compact systems in more natural settings, starting with the MNIST dataset. We focus on a narrow task involving only even digits from MNIST. We compare the resources needed to achieve strong performance on this task through 4 different approaches. 1. Training a model from scratch. 2. Distilling models from a general teacher. 3. Using group lasso regularization to prune a larger general model. And 4. Applying attribution-based pruning followed by recovery training on a large general model. Our teacher model is a ReLU multi-layer perceptron with 2 hidden layers, each containing 1,200 neurons, achieving 98.7% accuracy on the test set. For pruning, we start with this teacher model and reduce its hidden neurons to create a smaller network. In the distillation approach, we set the temperature to 20. When using group lasso for pruning, we adjust the penalty values between 0.001 and 0.008. Pruning neurons when their L2 norm falls below 0.05. If the number of remaining neurons drops below a certain threshold, we stop the pruning penalty and continue training to regain any lost performance. For the 4th method, we first prune and then recover performance using attribution scores. We require each method to achieve at least 97% accuracy on the test set and plot the relationship between neuron count and data points under this accuracy threshold. Our findings indicate that it is often best to aggressively prune the network initially and then train it further to meet the accuracy requirement. We observe that while group lasso pruning is sensitive to hyperparameter choices, both pruning methods outperform distillation and training from scratch, especially when the neuron count is high. Notably, other methods struggle to maintain 97% accuracy with fewer than 25 hidden neurons, while aggressive pruning consistently reduces the network size to a lower limit. Next, we turn our attention to large language models, LLMs, and focus on next token prediction in Python documents. We begin by pruning the neurons in the MLP blocks of the Llama-3.2-1b model. We also plan to prune dimensions in the residual stream, which involves removing parameters that interact with those dimensions. We utilize attribution scores for pruning and find a moderate correlation with true ablation scores. Our results show that when we prune neurons without a strategy, the loss increases rapidly at low sparsity levels. We also test group lasso regularization while training on Python documents and find that it smooths the sparsity versus loss curve, though it slightly increases the loss. Fortunately, we can recover performance after pruning with additional training on Python documents. Despite the initial loss increase from naive pruning, we can quickly regain that performance, making this approach more efficient than group lasso training. We then compare naive pruning with recovery training against distillation and training from scratch. We train networks with varying shapes and sizes using the Llama 3 architecture, with specific learning rates and batch sizes. For distillation, we use Llama-3.1-8b as a teacher with a temperature of 2. In our pruning and recovery approach, we adjust the sparsity levels of Llama-3.2-1b, as detailed in our appendix. Our findings suggest that pruning significantly outperforms both training from scratch and distillation on the data parameter frontier. If we have access to a general model, it seems more efficient to prune that model rather than distill it. Lastly, we discover that pruning random model components yields similar results to pruning the lowest attribution components. After a moderate number of recovery steps, both methods achieve comparable performance, supporting our earlier observations about the distribution of relevant features across model components. Section Summary. In this section, we compare various methods for optimizing performance on narrow tasks using the MNIST dataset and Python documents, finding that aggressive pruning consistently outperforms both distillation and training from scratch, especially in terms of neuron efficiency. We also observe that pruning random components yields similar performance recovery as pruning based on attribution scores, suggesting that important features are widely distributed across model components. Section: Related work. In this section, we review related work in the field. We note that many studies have expanded on the original concept of distillation, focusing on transferring intermediate representations and applying these methods to language models, often after pruning. Notably, some research indicates that pre-training the student model before distillation can lead to significantly better outcomes. When it comes to pruning, early methods utilized second-order techniques for weight pruning, while our approach relies on first-order attribution scores. In the context of training vision models, some researchers employed a group lasso penalty similar to ours, but they did so using the entire data distribution. Additionally, the concept of movement pruning was introduced to prune weights during transfer learning. Various studies have also explored structured pruning in large language models, including one that developed a method for task-specific pruning. Particularly relevant to our work is the research that applies gradient routing during training, which helps to direct network knowledge to specific model components, enabling pruning for unlearning purposes. We also observe that several recent studies have examined the connection between task structure and learning dynamics. One study briefly analyzed a task akin to CMSP, demonstrating that hierarchical relationships among tasks can lead to what they term domino learning dynamics. Lastly, we acknowledge that numerous strategies for machine unlearning have been proposed. One study investigates how unlearning fine-tuning on different model components impacts the success of unlearning, drawing from a mechanistic understanding of knowledge retrieval in large language models.